So where in the world was President Obama? Wall Street Journal op-ed by James Freeman asking why we haven't heard from the former president amid reports of an FBI informant spying on the Trump campaign. President Trump giving a nod to the Journal piece in a tweet saying it poses a very good question. Here now, maybe with some answers, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. He's also a Fox News contributor. So, Governor, do you think President Obama was in any way involved in the Russia-Trump investigation before President Trump took over?
I think it's very likely that he was, and we certainly need to know. I don't want to presume that that's the case, but let me call your attention to something, David, that really correlates to what James Freeman wrote in the Journal. It was very evident by the reports that came out of the Congressional Committee that within the FBI, they had already been talking to Carter Page and Papadopoulos. They knew that there was some potential. They discussed whether or not to go tell Donald Trump. You might have some people in your campaign that are not the best of folks. They may be colluding with Russians. You might want to be aware of this. They discussed it, and here's what they decided, according to the Congressional report. They decided not to tell Donald Trump. Now, I got to ask, David, why hasn't somebody brought this important truth out that by not telling Donald Trump, they essentially were hoping that there was collusion? They could have ended the whole Russian thing right there if they went to Donald Trump and he said, okay, I'll get rid of these guys. They never took it to him, and they specifically decided not to. Now, that decision had to be made all the way at the top. Loretta Lynch, James Comey, and or Barack Obama.
But we do have another little bit of information, which is that Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, these were the two FBI folks. Peter Strzok was very much involved with the whole process involving the Russia investigation, and in Hillary, too. He's the one who interviewed Hillary Clinton for the email scandal. But they were virulently anti-Trump. They wrote about it in their texts, and they also wrote on September 2016 back and forth to each other saying that President Obama wants to know what we are doing. What do you think they meant by that?
I think they meant exactly what they thought. They never thought these texts would see the light of day. They assumed Hillary would be elected. They never thought anybody would investigate them. There are more things than that really do bring some serious questions as to how high up in the administration it went. And I think with the one thing we know, there was collusion, David. Let me correct you. There was collusion, but it was collusion that was happening with inside the FBI, the Justice Department, and informants that had been planted inside the Trump campaign. You know, this is a direct threat to our entire system of government when you have the government that has decided it's going to play the game on behalf of one side or the other, and that is clearly what happened.
Well, we still don't know what started the investigation in the first place, whether it was the Papadopoulos meeting with an Australian where he got drunk and talked about Russians, or whether, in fact, it was the Trump dossier before that or whatever. Do you think that it was a legitimate concern on the part of the FBI and maybe President Obama and others about Russia interference in our election, or was it a blatant attempt to spy on the Trump campaign by his competitors?
Let me be blunt. It was a blatant attempt to spy, and I'll tell you why. I want to repeat again. If they were really concerned that Russia was somehow infecting the Trump campaign, they would have gone to the candidate, Donald Trump. They would have gone to his chief of staff. They would have gone to someone, but most likely to Trump himself, and said, sir, we have indications that there are people inside your camp that are really doing some dirty dealing, and you need to be aware of them. By not telling him that, they let this go on until they could get the FISA warrant and then take this even to a new level and surveil the campaign and individuals. I'm telling you, this thing stinks to high heaven.
Hey, Governor, they're giving me a rep, but I have to ask the bottom line question: how do we get to the bottom of this? I mean, some people are saying, how does the president reveal everything by releasing information? And Melissa, you have some breaking news on this?
Yeah, so the White House says that the Justice Department, this is according to Reuters, Inspector General is expanding the investigation to, quote, include any irregularities with the Federal Bureau of Investigation or the Department of Justice's tactics concerning the Trump campaign. And even more interestingly, that the White House Chief of Staff Kelly to set up a meeting with FBI, Justice, the intelligence community and congressional leaders to review the classified information related to FBI tactics during the 2016 campaign. So they're going to sit down and review all of that information together.
Well, and Governor, we have to remind folks, if they didn't already know, that the president could release all of this information with a stroke of a pen. I mean, he has the power to release the FISA warrants. He has the power to release all of this. Do you think he should?
Yes. To quote Jesus, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
How can we top that? You can't get better than Jesus for a quote there. Governor, thank you very much for being here and for responding to the breaking news. We appreciate it.